credited the world over for pioneering the modern sound of beat metal fusion. Emerging from Sacramento near San Francisco, they have managed in a few short years to not only produce a handful of stunning albums, but also becoming Grammy Award winners with a devoted worldwide fan base. Sacramento in the early 90s was heavily influenced by the fusion of hip-hop and metal emerging from bands such as Korn and Limp Bizkit. But one group not only matched what these musicians were doing, but exceeded it. That band was the Deftones. The lead singer of the Deftones, Chino Moreno, was born on the 20th of June 1973. The second of 5 children and the eldest of 3 brothers, it is said that the biggest influence in Chino's life was his mother, Debbie, who noticed and encouraged her son's musical talents from early on. Even though his mother taught at his school, something which would terrify most children, Chino didn't seem to mind and worked hard at his studies. Being a keen boarder, he was often seen skating around Sacramento or riding his BMX bike. Whilst we all know him today as Chino, back at school things were slightly different.
It's hard for me to call him Chino because as we were in high school and junior high, we always knew him as Camilo, and it was probably hanging out at the Cattle Club that I found out that people were calling him Chino, and I had to keep saying, who's that? Who's Chino? And they finally said, that's Chino. Well, no, that's Camilo. What are you talking about? But I don't know where it came in. I just know that in one world he was Camilo, in the other world he was Chino, and the Chino world won over.
Chino started his musical journey playing drums. However, he soon realised that banging the skins was not for him and turned to singing, often screaming along with his favourite tracks on the radio. It wasn't long before his talents were noticed, and he became the lead singer of a new band called the Deftones. One person who remembers his first encounter with Chino was the band's first manager, David Park.
First time I met Chino, Stefan had called me and invited me to go see his new band, Deftones. This is after the demise of FMK, this other band that Stefan and I had worked for. And little theater called the Guild Theater, just outside of downtown Sacramento. But Chino was very, very shy on stage, very shy. And, you know, he looked down at the stage and, you know, sort of hid his face from the crowd. He had this big mop of hair and turned his back to the audience, you know.
Chino is kind of a complex guy. You see him on stage, and he tends to be wild, jumping off, you know, the stage into the crowd. You know, very much the energetic, alpha male type frontman.
Stefan had told him that he'd invited me, but I don't think Chino knew what I looked like or whatever. So Chino comes off the stage, and I said, you know, hey, you know, good show, but you know, you really want to face the audience. I don't remember exactly what comment I made, but it was constructive criticism. And Chino's like, kind of, thanks, you know, whenever he walks away, and I guess he went over to Stefan, he's like, who the hell is that cock? And Stefan's like, that's Dave Park.
Off stage, he can tend to be kind of shy and very reserved. It almost tends to be kind of moody. I mean, I think that really shows in his music. You know, the music at Deftones careens through a lot of different kinds of emotions, and I think Chino really seems to kind of typify that.
Abe Cunningham was in the same school year as Chino and was a keen drummer, a much sought-after member for any new band. He had been drumming from an early age, having received tuition from his musical stepfather. Abe's musical skills found him playing in a jazz combo and even marching up and down the football field in the school band. Clearly, a change of musical direction was on the cards, and it wasn't long before Abe found himself drumming for a new group with a fresh sound and contemporary attitude. One person who knows Abe Cunningham and the band more than most is his ex-housemate and long-term friend, Sherry Pope Joy.
I first met Abe through him being in the Deftones, and soon after we moved in together to an apartment. We were all teenagers and partying all the time, of course, but he had to maintain. He was a manager in 3 bands and went to school as well. So a funny little story that I remember was when we first moved in, we were welcomed by several different people, but one in particular that I do remember, he came home on his scooter from work and was greeted by a man in some short shorts and welcomed him to the neighborhood. And at that time, the particular area we lived in was called Lavender Heights, and it's a huge gay community, and I think that kind of scared him a little bit. And that was probably within the first week or so that we lived there, and from that point on, that set the tone for the whole entire time that we lived there until we got evicted.
Abe Cunningham, I think he's my future ex-husband. So if you're out there, Abe, and you're listening, I'm here in Sacramento, California, waiting just for you. I will do anything. I'll buy your rent. Not pay it, but buy it.
Abe's pretty cool. Always a good talker, just loves to talk about anything and everything. He was in another band for a time back in Sacramento called Fallacy, which was actually the really big popular band before Deftones came out. And even back then he was known as being this crazy, amazing drummer, really good player, and he almost talks sort of the way he plays. Is, you know, real busy, and there's always like perpetual motion. Real cool guy, always just kind of cracking jokes and whatnot. Probably the motor mouth of the band.
Stephen Carpenter was born on the 3rd of August 1970. Having grown up in Sacramento, Stephen, later to be known as Steph, never really showed any real inclination towards music until a near-fatal car crash. This left him in a wheelchair for several months, and sadly now out of reach of his one true joy, skateboarding. To keep the boredom at bay, Steph decided to invest his insurance compensation money in a guitar and amp, a hobby he hoped he would become proficient at whilst recovering. Steph didn't just become proficient, he excelled. A keen follower of the group in those early days was Mike Martinez, and it wasn't long before he and Steph became close friends. In fact, Mike has a lot to thank Steph for.
Steph introduced me to my wife, Tina, and it was just an acquaintance that he had known. He met her and introduced her to me. Next thing I know, she's inviting me to Pearl Jam the next night or the next week or whatever. So we're going out to there, and the next thing I know, invite her to a movie. We started dating for like maybe about a couple of months, and then we got married in August of '95. I asked Steph to be my best man, and him and Celeste, Chino's wife, was bridesmaid, and when we had our first daughter in November of the following year, in '96, I asked Steph to be my godfather, and you know, he accepted, and I was very happy about that.
When I remember meeting Stephen, it was pretty much immediate as far as him being very comfortable with asking me, do this, do that, take me here, pick up my equipment, take it over there, take me to the store, hey, you got anything to eat? No announcement when he showed up, but that kind of set the tone for the next 10 years as far as how Stephen is. But everybody loved him for that, and we expected it, and it was great because you could just never tell Stephen